Speaker.
A 5-minute call on behalf of the Labor Party, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this is quite possibly and quite probably the least transparent government that New Zealand has had since the passage of the Official Information Act in the early 1980s. They do not comply with that legislation. They treat parliamentary questions and processes with contempt, regularly avoiding answering parliamentary questions at all. And it's no wonder that New Zealanders don't have much trust in the mechanisms of government anymore when the current government pays so little heed to them. This piece of legislation is a very welcome development, and I congratulate my colleague Adrian Rurafe on bringing this bill to the House. The previous speaker asked what's changed in the last few years from when we previously had parliamentary under-secretaries to now. Well, what's changed is that the government have placed a parliamentary under-secretary in charge of a policy area where they have exempted the organisations receiving large sums of government money from the Official Information Act. So the charter schools that David Seymour is responsible for oversight of in his role as parliamentary under-secretary don't have to comply with the Official Information Act. That's what's changed. This is the only time in the history of the under-secretary role where they've been placed in charge of a policy area that is exempt from the Official Information Act. So that's what's changed. That's why this legislation is necessary, and that's why I think it's great that it is going through the House. Because under the law as it exists today, partnership schools or charter schools, whatever you wish to call them, can communicate with the parliamentary under-secretary, David Seymour, and none of those communications are covered by the Official Information Act because they're not communicating with the ministry, nor are they communicating with the minister, therefore those communications are not covered. But they are communicating with the government because the person in the government who has that role is a parliamentary under-secretary. So it does create an anomaly, which means that information about how significant amounts of government money are being spent is being withheld from the public. This bill gets around that, and it means that those communications will be covered by the Official Information Act, and that's nothing to be afraid of unless the government, unless the parliamentary under-secretary has something to be embarrassed about in those communications. And I certainly hope he doesn't, because after all, the government have said that the organisations in question, the charter schools, are supposed to be more transparent and more accountable than any others within the education system, and yet under the current law that is not the case. This bill here does not overturn the exemption that partnership schools or charter schools currently enjoy from the Official Information Act. I think that maybe that's a bill that Parliament should consider in the future. And in fact, I'd go much wider and consider that many entities who receive millions of dollars in government subsidies should be subject to the Official Information Act. Because one of the big things that is eroding the coverage of the Official Information Act at the moment is the constant contracting out of government services, including everything from policy development right the way down to service delivery. That's being contracted out to agencies and those to businesses, and those businesses who are receiving government funding to do the core business of government are not subject to the Official Information Act. And I think that's something that Parliament should address at some future point, because I think that circumvents the original intention of the Official Information Act, which is that citizens should have the ability to scrutinise the actions of their executive. They should have the ability to scrutinise where public money is being spent. And at the moment, many things, since the passage of the Official Information Act in 1981, have certainly limited the ability of citizens to do that. So this is one small step, but a very welcome one, because it means that a member of the government who at the moment can operate completely in secret is being brought to account in the same way as the rest of the government are. And I'm glad that the National Party and that the ACT Party have finally seen the light and seen that actually a bit more transparency would be a welcome thing. I hope they embrace that spirit much more widely and start actually living up to their responsibilities to operate in a much more transparent manner. They are not above the law, they are not above scrutiny, and they should start acting a lot more like that so that the New Zealand public can judge them on their record, not judge them based on how much information they are hiding from the public, which seems to be the modus operandi of this current government.
Wow.